Early in the process, we introduce you to a diagram called the root cause of all sin. And that diagram commonly gets called the bullet diagram, a bullseye diagram, because it looks like a big bullseye. Out on the outside circle are our self-protective and sinful strategies and attitudes and behaviors that are a result of fearing losing control of our world, because at the center of it, I really don't believe God knows what He's doing. I think I know better than He does. So this unbelief and pride at the center is what can rule our lives. So the question is, what if instead of pride and unbelief at the center of my life, what if instead there was obedience, and instead there was belief and trust in God and a sense of humility that the gospel brings in our life? So now, rather than pride and unbelief driving me, there can be humility and belief. And that all centers on the reality of the gospel that says this: God loves me. And the more I understand how much God loves me, the more I should be overwhelmed with that love and that grace in my life. The more I understand the depth of my sin, the more I start to understand how much God really loves me. You see, if I only see my sin this big, I only need this much grace. But when I see my sin this big, how much grace do I need? I need this much grace. You know what's amazing? God brings this much grace. So the more I'm overwhelmed with the grace of God, the more that should produce a love in me for God. Now, the more I love God, the more I want to show Him that I love Him. So how do I show God that I love Him? Jesus said it this way: if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So my obedience now is my expression of love back to God. One author says it this way: the solution to the lack of obedience in our life is not to try harder, but to encounter the radical grace of God. See, the more I understand how much God loves me, the more I love Him. Now the more I want to show Him that I love Him, so the more I want to obey Him. How do I obey Him? He says, well, you obey me by loving others. So now obedience is not something I have to do. It is not a duty that is placed on me as a believer. Obedience is a privilege. It's something I get to do to show God how much I love Him. And now this obedience is not to a list of rules, it's to a person. And that's why we call it love-motivated obedience.